I'm hoping everyone can see that now. So just a brief intro. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lynne Condell, and I actually chair the Vulnerable Students Stakeholder Group in the Student Loan Company. So that is the stakeholder group that looks at applications processing policy around any particularly vulnerable groups, of which estranged students are one of the main topics that we do discuss at the meetings. So hence why I'm helping Susan today. Susan, do you just want to say hi and then we'll start?
Certainly, thanks, Lynn. Hi, everyone. So I'm Susan Mueller. I am the Higher Education Director at Standalone. I'm sure many of you already know me from this role. And yeah, so I also sit on the VSSG group that Lynn has just mentioned. And I think it's a really, really important topic today to look at student finance and how to support estranged students through that process. So I think I'm just going to hand back to Lynn, and we're going to be sharing this presentation between us. So I'm going to hand back to Lynn to kick us off.
Thanks, Susan. So as Rosie said, if you put your questions in the chat, and then if we haven't covered them, we'll come back to them at the end. And today very much is a whistle-stop tour of estrangement. So I know this is a topic that lots of you are interested in. So we'll try and get as much in as we can in the next 50 minutes, talking quickly. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss ways to identify students in our institutions, because that is one of the biggest problems. How do we support students when we don't know who they are? We're going to look at who, according to the student support regs, can be deemed to be independent from a student's finance perspective. And we're going to keep coming back to that. Just because they don't meet the SLC definition, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be supported, really, is one of the things that we're going to keep reiterating. And we're going to look at evidence that Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales will accept, and maybe for your own university bursaries, if you have one, make some suggestions regarding students that can't evidence their situation. It could be they might not be able to evidence estrangement, but can we get them down the independence route a different way? Very brief look at the estrangement form for SFE, SFW, and highlight how to contact the teams. Okay, so Susan, you're going to do this next bit.
Just bear with me one sec. Yes, so starting off, as Lynn said, the first big challenge that universities and colleges always have, unfortunately, is to identify estranged students. So at the moment, I think we're all aware that there is no one easy way to identify estranged students in our institutions. So we have to use a mixture of tools and ways in which to do that. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples, and you may already have found other ways of identifying estranged students in your own institutions. So the Bursaries Administration Service, which used to be known as HEBS, is one way to identify estranged students. But at the moment, estranged is not actually a category under the, I still call it HEBS, under the HEBS data. So you need to use other as a filter to filter out this particular group of students. We have been told in the VSSG that a student loans company is working on this, and hopefully during the course of this academic year, there will be that estrangement filter on that data set. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Another way of doing it is something that quite a number of institutions have started to do or already doing, is having a question on your enrolment form to identify students who are estranged. You can obviously use your hardship applications. You can work with other departments such as accommodation departments. It's also, I think, really important to promote any institutional support you have for estranged students, in order to reach out to those students and to help those students come to you and identify them that way. So a good way to do that is, for example, to use our Estranged Student Solidarity Week, which we run every year. And this year it's going to be at the end of November again, 22nd to the 26th of November. So that's a really good week to really sort of promote and push the support that you have for estranged students. Or, of course, sign the standalone pledge, promote your commitment to estranged students across the institution under the standalone pledge. It's also a good idea to link up with your student union, because they may well be in a position to pass on any estranged students that they identify and make that link with you. I've been working for a number of years now with UCAS, and they are in the process of taking forward a tick box for estranged students. Now, at the moment, it looks like that will come on stream in the spring of 2022, although there is no official confirmation of that yet. Again, watch this space. But what I need to say, or we all need to be very aware of, is that obviously that tick box will only pick up those students who are actually estranged at that point when they apply to universities through UCAS. Which also leads me on to the point that we've got to be really aware that, of course, there will be a lot of students that will not necessarily either be estranged at that point, or actually not necessarily meet the student loan company's definition of estranged, even though they actually technically are. So this is a really, really big, complex area, which you know, we're not going to be able to go into in too much detail today, but I think it's really important to bear that in mind. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Right, so I'll just get my slide up properly so I can actually read it. There we go. Good. So yes, so student finance, as we know, is assessed on gross taxable household income for the prior tax year, and there are obviously certain disregards. So who is actually in my household as a student? So a student household consists of students' natural or adoptive parents, and this may also include step parents, and in some cases the student's partner. Now, if a student is independent, though, none of the above will apply. Grandparents, foster parents, brothers, sisters, so any other family members are not normally included in the calculation and the assessment. Now, in terms of step parents only count if they are a partner of a natural or adoptive parent. So if we look at an example, so Emma, for example, lives with her mum and her stepdad. So her mum moves out during the student's year 2, and Emma stays with her stepdad. So she would not be assessed on her stepdad's income in year 3, because her stepdad is no longer her mum's partner, which does mean that she would be mean tested on her mum or her dad. Now, obviously, if she doesn't have a relationship with them, if there is no contact, she will then need to prove estrangement from her parents. Right, so now let's get into some slightly more technical stuff. So Lynne mentioned the legislation around student support. So just to have a look at the sort of legislations that classify students as independent from parents. So there's 10 different possibilities here, which I'm going to go through one by one. So the first one is they are over 25 on the first day of the academic year for which they are applying. The second is they have supported themselves financially for a period of not less than 3 years on or before the first day of the year for which they are applying. And this all applies to the first day of the first year of which they are applying. So I might not actually say that every time, but this is the definition. It gets a bit long otherwise. So The third option is they have no living parents, or number 4, their parents cannot be found, or it's not reasonably practical to get in touch with them. They may be married or in a civil partnership, or they have a care of a child on or before the first day of the year for which they are applying. And looking at the remaining options to define a student as independent, they may be irreconcilably estranged from their parents. So that is one category under which they will be assessed as independent. They may have had no contact with their parents for a period of a year, usually it's 12 months. But we do know that obviously there is flexibility in that. So it's not a rigid definition of 12 months. The student was looked after by a local authority, and that's obviously within the legislation, which is the meaning of Section 22 of the Children's Act, which means that throughout the 3 months before their 16th birthday, and they have not returned to the care of their parents at any time before they start their course. Or the final category is that the student's parents actually live outside the, it says here the European, I just say the European Union, and the Secretary of State is satisfied that either it is not reasonably practical or it would be dangerous for them to provide their income details. So this is quite a sort of specific legislative definition of who estranged, sorry, I keep saying estranged, who independent students are. So we're going to look at a couple of these categories in a bit more detail. We're going to look at independence due to being irreconcilably estranged, a situation that parents cannot be found or it's not reasonably practical to get in touch with them. Also parents who are outside of the EU and cannot be found, or the situation that students have no living parents. And to do that, I'm actually going to hand back to Lynne to take us through the nitty-gritty details of how that all works in student finance. Fantastic. Thank you. Over to you, Lynne.
Before we just move on, and I know we only have an hour, it's just I just want to flag something up that the SLC will use, the path of least resistance. It's not an SLC term, as you know, but they will use the easiest way to assess a student, and that might not suit us in our institutions. It won't suit us in our institutions in a lot of cases, because we love stats, we love reports, we want to pull off reports from UCAS, from the SLC systems, but they will do it the easiest way. So if a student, for example, is estranged, that might take a bit of work because they might have to provide a body of evidence. But if that student, for example, becomes 25, they don't need any evidence because they know how ill they are. So we just need to be mindful of this when we're doing stats, when we're offering our own bursaries, or when we're doing any sort of data. So just as an example, this student would be 24, and in the first year, they're estranged from their family. They send all their information in. They've got a body of evidence to show they're estranged. But during that first year, they turn 25. So in their second year, on the SLC system, there'll be nothing about them being estranged. They will just be 25. I don't mean they'll just be 25 because that's a landmark in itself, isn't it? So, but if you're pulling off data from the SLC systems to say, oh, these students might be estranged, they might qualify for our bursary or live-in accommodation because they're estranged, you just need to be mindful that your first year data of estranged students will never match your second year data. And we have this all the time at the SLC meetings, is that they pull off all these stats and they're just a nightmare, aren't they, Susan? Because it looks like all the first year students have left, or all the second year students have left. And It's not, it's just that they will move in and out of those categories. That's why we wanted to flag those different variations of being independent, not because we're legislative geeks, but just to show that students can move between those categories. So that's why you do need your own checks and balances in place to identify your students. Okay, so just to talk about estrangement, which I know is the topic that you've come here to listen about, but just to be mindful that students will dip in and out of those other categories in a lot of cases. So the regs actually say the student has communicated with neither of their parents for the period of 1 year before the beginning of the relevant year, or there's this lovely word and tiny word which means so much to so many students, or in the opinion of the Secretary of State, the student can demonstrate on other grounds the student is irreconcilably estranged. So because it says or, that means there is no minimum period that the student has to fulfill. I think we get very hung up on this. How long ago did you stop speaking to your parents? When did you last have contact? Really, that it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, all right, if there's 12 months between or more since they last had contact, it's obviously much easier for the students to evidence. But what we don't want people to get hung up on is that 12-month period. So much so that Susan particularly has been championing it for it to be removed from the external facing comms that the SLC provide, because we do think that students read, and not just students, advisors read, oh, you've only just fallen out with your family, or this is so recent, nobody is going to deem you to be independent. And actually, the lovely word or is the thing that you need to remember. So there are 2 ways that you can be deemed to be estranged from your family. So estrangement is actually a form of independence. So under the Student Support Reg framework, estrangement isn't a separate thing. There are a number of ways, as Susan has listed, that you can be deemed to be independent. Estrangement is just one of them. So we've already said, although there's a mention of the year, there's no minimum period. The issue really is to do on whether on the basis of probability and evidence, you can provide that evidence. In some cases, I'm going to be suitably vague here, it needs to be reproven each year, and you can help by signing the declaration for the student if you feel that you're able to do so. In some instances, the body of evidence would be so robust that the student won't be required to provide any other evidence, and there is no rule of thumb for that. So it's done on a case-by-case basis. It's very much a manual process in the SLC, so just be mindful of that. Student Finance England have a team that look at all estrangement cases, which isn't replicated in Student Finance Wales. And they will also conduct telephone interviews for students that who have either no evidence or their evidence is not robust at all. Okay, and there is an updated version of the estrangement declaration, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's really important when we talk about the estrangement dec is that is not an essential requirement. So the student might come to you and say, I need someone to sign this form, but actually they've got loads of evidence. So if they don't need the declaration signing by someone in their institution if they've got lots of evidence, you can still do it if the student feels they want to send it off, but there is no requirement. It's not an essential requirement. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit there. Okay, so just some fast facts. If something's happened in relation to the family situation after the student has been means tested on one or more of their parents, it's almost impossible to get the application unpicked. And I've had that many times where the students have come to university 1 week later, they've said, actually, I haven't really had a proper relationship with my family for 3 months, 6 months. I know Susan has lots of cases like this at Standalone. but I got them to fill the form, and that's because an advisor in Student Finance England or Wales told me I needed to get the form filled in. So that's why it's really important that we try and identify these students before they get to university, if that is possible. And I'm saying almost impossible. There have been a few instances where we have had the household income removed by liaising with the independence team, but just be mindful, generally speaking, once they sorry, I thought I put that on silent. Once they've started their course, it's almost impossible to do that. And so in those cases, you are going to have to try and support that student to the following academic year through other means. So whether that be institutional hardship funding, signpost to charities, whether you have an estrangement bursary in your institution. And what we see, and I know Susan's got lots of examples of this, is that students will say, the institution won't help me with an estrangement bursary because the SLC are not saying I'm estranged. And it's a bit like the tail wagging the dog here, isn't it? That we're saying if the SLC framework doesn't deem them to be estranged, we don't seem to have, in some cases, our own checks and balances in place. And actually, I think it should be, personally speaking, the other way around, and I'm sure Susan would agree, is that we should be identifying students and saying, yes, we think these students are estranged. And in some cases, the SLC record will match. In some cases, it won't. And I'm just going to give you a few examples of those now. Okay, so contacting Student Finance England, there is the caseworker team there is this Estranged, terrible email address, at slc.co.uk. And this is for students that have been specifically assigned a caseworker, but you can also use this. You can contact the team via this email address. And I know historically, going back a few years, when you spoke to some advisors, they definitely felt like it was a bit of a them and us type scenario. That has changed. The team in Student Finance England are absolutely brilliant. So if you've got a case and you think, I'm not sure what to do here, please do contact them. They will come up with some ideas they'll try and come up with some ideas. They will conduct telephone interviews with the students if necessary. And it could be that you contact them and say, I've got this scenario. I think this student really would benefit from a telephone interview, and they will help you. And then for general queries, is this independent_student inquiries, again, terrible email address. But if you want some advice, or the students want some advice about filling the forms in. Student Finance Wales have no such team. So they've taken a slightly different approach to processing, I'm going to say, in Wales. And what they have done is that they've trained a number of staff to do everything. So they should be able to take the forms in, look at them regardless of what type of scenario the student falls under, and be able to see the application through. So just be mindful of that. There isn't a dedicated team in Wales. You can use this email address. Personally speaking, I find it's much better to just pick up the phone and speak to people in Student Finance Wales. They have got this secure messaging service in Student Finance Wales. Now, if you work at a Welsh institution, you're probably really aware of it. But I wasn't. So working at institutions in England or Northern Ireland, you might not be aware of it. And if the students log into their account, it appears as a little screen, and the students can send messages, and they're answered by assessors. So they're not answered by call centre staff, no disrespect to call centre staff. They're answered by those that do the assessing. So if the student's got a specific query, I'm not sure about evidence about X, Y, or Z, the students can send a message and it will be answered by an assessor. Okay, so the estrangement declaration form for England, it is on Student Finance England's webpage. For Wales, students need to ring up and it will be sent out to them. It's a newish form. It was changed a couple of years ago, and it signposts to standalone, which is brilliant for your advice booklet, doesn't it, Susan, online? And it also signposts to student services. It's very vague. It says you can take this form to student services in your institution. And I get loads of contacts from advisors, and I don't know whether you get any contact from advisors, Susan, about people being a bit wary of saying, I don't know this student's situation, they've told me this. And really, that's all you're signing the form, that's all you're completing the form to say is this student has told me this, and they have got a letter from a teacher, someone in their school, a tutor. It's not like signing a declaration in blood without being flippant about it. You're not signing to say, I declare this student is estranged. What you're saying is they've told me their situation, they've got a letter from whoever. The idea is not to have these vulnerable students wandering around our institutions, not knowing where to go, which is what was happening before. So it could be when the student brings you the form that you have a conversation with them and you say, I think your tutor might be better signing this because you saw them about not being able to hand your coursework in when that thing happened at home, for example. So, you know, it's definitely a conversation starter as opposed to you being the end point. So please don't feel under pressure if you don't feel like you can fill the form in. And going back to what I said earlier, there is no requirement. It's not an essential part of the process. The idea is it's a tool in your toolkit to support students. Okay. I think just the bottom line there is that are all front-facing staff aware of the form, of who can sign it, what's required, how to have that conversation? And I know that's a big ask, saying all front-facing staff. But if all front-facing staff in your, whatever your drop-in centre, your advice centre, that would be, and your student union maybe, that would be a really good starting point, is to get a form, maybe have a training session, a discussion session, collectively, and say, oh, if a student brought this to me, this would be what I'd do, or this would be the conversation that I'd have. Training everyone in your institution is quite a hard thing to do, but maybe speak to people that work on the help desk, on the library. It's those front-facing staff, isn't it? Okay, and I've done a couple of screenshots, which I'm not really going to go into, but you will get the slides here. So on that page there, it's signposted to the standalone guide. And here it just tells you about, asks you about when you're aware of the situation, what the students told you. And it does also say, if you are unable to find anyone to complete this form, speak to someone in your student services. Okay, conscious of the time. So what happens when they get the form? Hopefully it's been signed by someone. They'll check any evidence that's been sent with it. And if it's not suitable, Student Finance England or Wales will contact the student. So that's a good part of your conversation, is make sure you say to them, we'll send this off, keep checking your online account, check your emails. Someone from Student Finance will be in touch with you. If they get back to you and say it's not enough evidence, maybe come back to me and we'll see what we can do to support you, move it on to the next stage, a caseworker stage. Students will then get an email to say either we've assessed you as this, you've been assessed as estranged for your whole course, you've been assessed as estranged for this period. So they will get an email to tell them the outcome. And just this bottom line, which I'm going to come back to, sometimes students might well be deemed to be parents cannot be found rather than estranged. And that is then going back to, well, would you still help them with an estrangement bursary? Would you still help them with other things, you know, deposits on your accommodation? Just because Student Finance, with their very archaic regulations that haven't been changed since 2010 or something, are saying, actually, it doesn't meet their definition of estrangement. Does it meet your institutional definition of estrangement, which is a really important point. Okay. So we've touched on this already, How can you help students without evidence or with limited evidence? So you can help them fill out the form. You can write on the form, the students tell me this has happened, but as it only happened 3 weeks ago, they have very limited or no evidence other than maybe some sort of PC form for an extension for their coursework, for example. That's quite a common thing, isn't it? You could then recommend that someone from the estrangement team gives the student a ring, arranges the time to speak to them on the phone. They won't just ring them randomly, so just going back to the caseworker ringing them, they will arrange a time to speak to them because they don't want to be ringing them when they're sitting on the bus or sitting at the back of the lecture theatre. So it is a proper telephone appointment, although it is informal. I think the form really, as I've said already, is a great gateway to a conversation. So how can you help this student build up a body of evidence? And I know over the years, I mean, I worked at JMU for over 30 years and supporting estranged students was part of my role. Students would be quite frustrated if they bring you a letter and you might say to them, actually, this letter isn't going to be sufficient for student finance. Can you get anything else? Could you ask them to rewrite the letter for you and include this bit of evidence? Students do, because possibly by the time they come to you, they've already spoken to 6 people and they've phoned student finance 4 times. If you try and explain to them about building up a body of evidence, it's much better to send everything off together and it'll be looked at holistically rather than them getting one bit of evidence, then another bit of evidence, then another bit of evidence. So it's definitely in a lot of cases, well, in most of the cases of the students I worked with, they would need more than one piece of evidence, just because it might have been something might be from 2 years ago when they first went into sixth form. So they might need that and something more up to date. And I do think students get frustrated. So part of the conversation is just to say, look, let's do this once, let's do it properly, and hopefully then you won't need to redo it next year. Okay. So 1106, we're doing okay. I just want to touch on a couple of other student categories that may well be used by the independence teams in England and Wales. Okay. So parents cannot be found, or it's not reasonably practical to get in touch with them. Make comprehensive notes, hang on a minute. Okay, this category is often used, I put sometimes, for those students that cannot evidence estrangement. Students with parents maybe in prison or unwell, or maybe I've got a mental health issue, or maybe just very limited evidence. And it's often used after a caseworker interview. I know over the years when Susan and I have been working with the caseworkers and Student Finance England, who are a brilliant team, instead of saying, right, this student meets the definition, the SLC definition of estranged, we can say, actually, the parents cannot be found, or it's not reasonably practical to get in touch with them. So we will use that for this year. And when we come to reassess them next year, we will revisit what evidence that they may have. Okay. It's also sometimes used for students that maybe have been in care or care experienced, but don't meet that very specific section 22. Again, think of these other categories when you're supporting your students. Think of these other categories when you are awarding your institutional bursaries. Some students, and Susan and I have been talking about this a lot with the SLC recently, who are not yet estranged. So back to that, you can't get your application unpicked. So it could be they're living in an abusive relationship. So under the SLC regulations, they have contact with their parents. You know, they might still be living with them, but they're in an abusive relationship. Their parents might not sign the form. So we just need to make sure that we don't miss these cases and don't think, oh, because the SLC have decided this student's under this category, doesn't mean that they aren't estranged. So it's just to be aware that this will be used for other things. And the other one, parents residing outside the EU, and the Secretary of State is satisfied that assessment of household income would put them in jeopardy. It's very wordy, this bit, or it's not reasonably practical for them to send money to the UK. So this might be used for a student that maybe has come to the UK as an unaccompanied minor. And what we would say is that if you look on the FCO, it used to be the FCO website, the gov.uk foreign travel advice, it will say things like, there's no telecoms in this country, the banks are only open on a Monday morning from 9 to 9:30. They will have a stamp or some sort of paper to say, you know, they came as an unaccompanied minor. Just a little footnote there, though, just because it's inconvenient to get money sent to the UK doesn't mean the students don't have to provide the evidence. So, for example, I was talking to someone whose parents lived in Australia. They obviously wouldn't meet this category. So it's about really people that have fled danger, isn't it? Okay. Care leavers, just going back to that point, the regs actually say student was looked after under Section 22 of the Children's Act, and often social workers will write a letter to say they were under whatever section. I mean, many will not mention a section, but in your institution, it could be that you will only support care leavers that fall under the SLC's definition of being a care leaver. And actually, it's really important to note that what the SLC define as a care leaver is very niche, so it's very specific. And most universities should and do look at care experience now. And again, this just to expand that slightly, it could be if the student was taken into care after their 16th birthday, they might still have a social worker or a link worker, but they wouldn't meet that definition. And this often happens, you know, when you're talking to young people, they don't meet the true definition of a former relevant looked after child. They do still need support. And, you know, they might have been in a supported housing scheme. That's often how you pick up young people, certainly how we picked up young people in my institution was working with the local supported housing schemes, and you might pick up estranged students through that way as well. So just to be mindful, you might get a student that says, well, no, I wasn't in care, but I didn't live with my family and I lived in a supported, they might not describe it as a supported housing scheme. This is about our language, isn't it? As I hate to say it, as middle-aged people using the SLC legislation, they might not say, they might just say, oh, I lived with someone. So just to be mindful that it could be that they were in a supported housing scheme and they are still estranged from their families. Okay, so no living parents. Students, one of the definitions that Susan read out at the beginning is that no living parents, they'll need to provide evidence, so the death certificates, which again, that's quite a difficult conversation to have with a very young person, isn't it? One of the main complexities, obviously it's fairly cut and dried if both of your parents are dead, but one of the complexities that arises is that if a student has been assessed on one parent, so they've been living with their mum, for example, and then their mum dies, they will be told, right, you need to go up, where's your dad? So, and it could be that student has not had any contact with their dad since they were 3. So just be mindful of that. You're assessed on one parent, that parent then dies. They will need to either prove that they'll need to prove they are estranged from that living parent if that parent exists somewhere. So that is quite a difficult situation. And the other thing would be if they live with their mum and a step parent. And I'm obviously saying mum, sorry, all the time, but it could be they live with a natural parent and a step parent, and their natural parent dies. They will never be assessed on the step parent alone. So again, they would need to find their natural parent. So this is just, I think I might have done an example. So John is in his 2nd year and assessed on his mum and his stepdad. And his mum dies, I put unexpectedly in there for a bit of a flourish, in December. he can be reassessed from that point in the year without any household income. So at the point his mum dies, all household income would be removed from his application mid-year. But from the next year, he'd need to find his natural dad or prove he's estranged from them. He won't ever be assessed on that step-parent alone, unless that step-parent adopted him. So that's quite a difficult conversation, isn't it? Telling a student who's lost a parent, they then need to go away and discuss where their other parent was. So, so you just need to be mindful. The caseworkers in Student Finance England will help with this if you have any of these cases. And every year when Susan and I look at the stats, there are a significant number, still a small number, but a significant number of students in this scenario, which I think it must be awful for those students to have or for the advisors to have that conversation, but also awful for those young people because they might never have had anything to do with that natural parent. So again, would you include these in your estrangement bursary? They're not care leavers. So just to be mindful that these young people are particularly vulnerable and might need some financial and or other help. Okay, so just coming back to institutional bursaries. Thankfully, we know lots of institutions now have signed the standalone pledge and have bursaries for estranged students. So I think that Susan and I, just to keep reiterating, it really isn't appropriate that we insist that these young people meet the estranged evidence from student finance. What we need to be doing in our institutions is developing the policy sufficiently that we know, well, if they fall under this or this category, we would still support them because they don't have any family support. They haven't got a corporate parent. They haven't got any other family support. And it's really important that we keep remembering that path of least resistance. So the SLC data itself is not that reliable, not because they don't do data, it's just because they will use the easiest way to assess people. Okay, I did talk very quickly there. So just in summary, what we have talked about right back at the beginning, we've discussed some ways to identify people. We've looked at some of the legislation. We've looked at the teams in Student Finance England and Wales. Very brief look at the estrangement form and identified how we can contact the teams in Student Finance England and Wales for additional evidence and support. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to breathe.
There's been quite good discussion on the chat, Lynn. I don't know if you want to jump in and kind of take them, or I read them out, or what you'd like to do between you.
Well, I'll start at the chat, and Susan, if maybe you come in as well.
Yep, certainly.
I'll start right at the beginning. So Paula has said, doesn't Student Finance England and Wales always count the first day as the 1st of September? Yes, it does. So for eligibility, it's the first day of the course. So that's the if for autumn start, that's the 1st of September in your very first year. For financial matters, it's the first day of the year for which they are applying, which will be for autumn start, the 1st of September. And obviously for starts later in the year, it might be the 1st of Jan or the 1st of April. So yeah, Paul has come in. Thank you, Paul. Sorry, didn't see you answered. So Paul said, at BU, we've added the question on estrangement this year as part of the online registration. That really is the way forward. I'm sure, Susan, you'll agree there.
Absolutely, although there is always the caveat to actually get that question right, which again, there is, I don't think, any, sort of real standard formula for that. But what I would say about that is, and I'm sure you've all had your various experiences with the question, is to be very, very mindful of the language that you use, because the thing that I come across a lot is that students, especially new students, aren't familiar necessarily with the terminology estrangement. So you might want to give an explanation on your form as to what you actually mean by that. Just to pick up the second bit here about UCAS, yes, UCAS do ask the question about being a care leaver or being in care. And again, this is a difficult one with estrangement, in that you can be estranged and have had care experience. But if you are a statutory care leaver, that will be the definition that that student finance use, and also the institution. If you are care experienced, but you don't fall into that statutory definition that we've been talking about, that Lynne has sort of talked about, and we sort of looked at the legislation there, then you can be estranged, and you usually then fall into the estrangement category despite having had some care experience. So I think it's really mindful to watch the sort of overlap there. And then you've got those students who have never been in local authority care but are estranged. So this is also why the UCAS tick box is so important, to have that separate category as being estranged in the future.
It was quite interesting. There was a bit of backwards and forwards on that, in terms of, like, say, asking the question on the form, and people kind of what they say and what they'll do on UCAS and what they'll tell you. So that was quite interesting. Susie's question, sorry Lynne, I've scrolled down, was probably the next one.
Yes, maybe for those.
Is there an argument for those who keep in contact to get visitation of younger siblings?
I actually wrote that down to mention, actually, but I was talking very quickly because I was very conscious of the time and I wanted to get to the questions. Is that it's what is the definition of contact? Yeah. Isn't it? What we would describe as contact might not be what another person would describe as contact. And certainly we need to take, and I'm going to say, a common sense approach here. For somebody that has I'm going to say visitation rights, that's not the right thing. Somebody that keeps in touch with their siblings, but maybe has limited contact with their parents, are they estranged? Well, obviously I don't know the scenario here, but I would say that you can still have contact with your siblings and be estranged from your family. So it's estranged from your parents, it's not estranged from the whole of your family. You can still see your grandparents. So it is what would be deemed to be contact with your parents. And obviously that is a judgment call. But it's perfectly reasonable to say that anybody would want to stay in touch with their siblings, but maybe not with their parents. So yes, I think there is an argument, definitely, Susie. Sorry.
I do totally agree with that, Lynne, and we do have those cases quite a lot, that students who are estranged from their parents do have contact with their siblings. I mean, we had a case where a university said that they have a student who is estranged but has contact with a disabled sibling who's a support. Now, as a result, they may have a sporadic contact or a sporadic conversation with one of their parents, but that doesn't mean that they have a meaningful relationship or meaningful contact with that parent. And I think that's so important in looking at each case and their situation, to really have a look at, it is that relationship with the parent that's absolutely the important part.
Yeah, very much so. So Adam has asked about a contact for student finance NI. Here we go. So in Northern Ireland, although we have student finance NI as an umbrella, it is just that. It is an umbrella that is used for the call centre, but the processing is done in each of the individual education authorities. So if you have an issue with if you have a query about estrangement, you will need to contact the individual education authority about that case. So if you go on SFNI, there is an Education Authority finder, and you can put the student's postcode in, and it will tell you which one that you need to speak to. Unfortunately, I'm not saying unfortunately, actually some of them it works much more efficiently than others. So each of those they're like local education authorities where will have their own processes. So you'll need to contact them directly. And that has been a bit of a nightmare during lockdown, because with people working at home, as I know certainly at the beginning, we had lots of trouble with phone lines working at home, which has got better. But just be mindful, there isn't an email address or contact for the generic SFNI, and don't waste your time contacting SFNI as the umbrella call centre, because you just go round and round in circles. You need to contact the individual education authority.
Thanks, Lynn. I think there's a bit of backwards and forwards then in the chat, and really the next thing I think was just from Paula. I think was just kind of making a comment on what you were saying in terms of contact, and saying that some parents deliberately keep contacting the young person as a means of control, which obviously you kind of did mention that in the presentation.
We're having a session in a few weeks about coercive behaviour and financial abuse from a charity, so that might help us all understand that a bit more, because fortunately I don't think a lot of us do understand what that is actually like. There's some research by I think it was Citizens Advice around financial institutions need to make it much easier for not for students, obviously it wasn't about students, for people to remove themselves from those financial links that are controlling them. So I'm hoping that will come up in the presentation.
Thank you, Lynn. Sorry, I was just trying to scramble then just to get the, I'm just going to pop it in here now, because I think that's a perfect kind of natural kind of hopefully end for that kind of informative session. I've just popped the link in the chat, which is the link in case people haven't done for the other sessions we have as part of this autumn series for staff. We have City of London Police coming to do one on financial crime, and then I believe the one after that, like we say, is from looking at kind of financial coercion and abuse. So hopefully if you haven't already done so, you can kind of sign up for the rest of those. I think it feels like a very good place to finish. I didn't know if there's any last words from Susan or Lynn before we finish.
Certainly from me, if anyone has got any specific queries, if you want to drop me an email, I'll try and help. I saw RA57, sorry, I don't know who RA57 is, about the financial self-support. So you need to support yourself financially for a period of 1,095 days, 3 years basically. It does need to be 365 times 3. The year for which you are applying. So the financial regulation does say the year for which you're applying, but years spent in full-time education doesn't normally count. So by default, it tends to mean before you started your course. So on the 1st of September, 3 years financial evidence, and you can do that through P60s or something from HMRC. Hope that helps, but if not, drop me an email, I'll try and help you.
Thanks, Lynn, and